Hi, good morning. With the fourth and final season of The Umbrella Academy coming out next week, I thought it'd be fun to do a recap of the timeline from the first three seasons. Starting in season 1, we have a little background information that at some unknown time, Reginald Hargreaves released a jar of light particles that will eventually lead to the burst of the umbrellas. He's sitting with his wife Abigail, who seems to be dying, as rockets fly around outside. From here, Reginald travels to the United States, where he builds a Hotel Obsidian in 1918 and then purchases the DS Umbrella Manufacturing Company in 1928. Fast forward to October 1st, at 7 a.m., Harold Jenkins is born, and unfortunately, his mother dies in childbirth, leaving him to be raised by an abusive father. At noon, 43 women spontaneously give birth, and Reginald jets around the world adopting 7 of the 43 children and trains them to become the Umbrella Academy. Except for number 7, in 1993, Reginald discovers that 4-year-old number 7 is too powerful for him to control, so he contains them until he forces Allison to rumor their sibling into believing that they don't have any powers. In 2002, the Umbrella Academy has their first mission. Harold becomes obsessed with the Umbrellas and he leaves home to join them, but he gets rejected by Reginald and laughed at by a crowd, which is kind of insane. Like, why are you laughing at this poor kid? But his obsession turns into hatred, and he returns home, kills his abusive father, and lands himself in jail for 12 years. On November 10th, 2002, 13-year-old Five tries to jump through time and accidentally jumps too far into the future, landing on April 1st, 2019, where he finds his siblings dead in the destroyed academy and nothing but apocalypse around him. He lives in the academy ruins for 45 years until the handler recruits him to work for the commission. During an Umbrella Academy mission in 2006, later referred to as the Jennifer incident, Ben Hargreaves dies. Klaus conjures him and assures him that he can go into the light whenever he wants, so Ghost Ben hangs around a while. After this, and especially because Reginald blamed the children for Ben's death, they start leaving home, except Luther stays, and when he's critically injured on a mission alone, Reginald gives him a serum which saves him, but it mutates his body. Unable to face what he's done, Reggie sends Luther to the moon in 2015, where number 1 lives in solitude for 4 years until Reginald's death. On March 21st, 2019, Reginald orchestrates his death to bring the Umbrellas back to the Academy in order to save the world. I'm still not sure how he knew about the apocalypse. 2 days later, on March 23rd, the siblings hear the news about their father. Allison finds out while she's on a red carpet, while Klaus leaves rehab, immediately overdoses, and then hears the news on a TV playing in the ambulance. The next day, March 24th, the siblings gather at the Academy. Five returns through a time vortex. His consciousness is 58, but his body is 13 again. And then after being attacked at Gritty's Donuts, Five visits 7 and tells them about jumping into the future and finding the apocalypse. Meanwhile, Klaus steals an ornate box of Reginald's and throws away his journal, which Harold retrieves from the dumpster and finds notes detailing Seven's powers. Hazel and Cha-Cha arrive in 2019 to find Five. On March 25th, Five learns that the eyeball he found in Luther's hand is a dead end. Leonard seeks out Seven to start manipulating them, and Hazel and Cha-Cha attack Five at the department store. The next day, they attack the academy and kidnap Klaus. Diego powers down Grace, who seems to be deteriorating. The next morning, March 27th, Leonard steals Victor's anxiety meds so that their powers can surface. Hazel and Cha-Cha torture Klaus until Patch shows up to rescue him, but then Cha-Cha murders Patch, and Klaus escapes the motel with their briefcase, but gets teleported to Vietnam in 1967, where he fights in the war and falls in love with a fellow soldier named Dave, who dies in battle. Klaus returns the next day, having been gone almost a year. Five tricks Hazel and Cha-Cha into arranging a meeting with the handler for him, and the handler offers for Five to return to work at the commission as management. Five leaves for the commission, and March 29th plays out for the rest of his siblings. At Leonard's insistence, Seven invites his siblings to his concert, but he finds that they're having a family meeting without him, which triggers his powers to come out as he's ranting on the walk home afterward. Diego finds Grace alive again, and she later tells him the truth about Reginald's death. Luther finds out that Reginald never needed his moon research, and later Seven finds Reginald's journal that Leonard has been hiding. Meanwhile, at the commission, Five secretly sends orders to Hazel and Cha-Cha to terminate each other and intercepts Dot's order for them to protect Harold Jenkins, but ends up getting caught by the handler and escapes back to the start of the day. So rewinding on March 29th, Five returns just after Victor storms out, so Leonard overhears that the Umbrellas are onto his real identity. Five explains to his siblings about the commission, and he, Diego, and Allison head to the police to steal the police file on Harold Jenkins. Allison realizes that Harold Jenkins is Leonard Peabody, which means that Seven is in danger. Luther finds out again, but not really again, that his time on the moon was for nothing, so he spirals. Klaus tracks him down to a club and dies on the floor, which leads to him visiting the Gray place where he finds Reginald but returns to his body before he can hear Reggie's plan. Leonard Harold takes Seven to a family cabin and then out to dinner where he set up an attack that will force out Victor's powers, and it does, killing two of the attackers and hospitalizing the third. Hazel wants out of the life, so he chains up Cha-Cha to a pipe in the motel to run away with Agnes. On March 30th, with 2 days left until the apocalypse, the siblings find out the truth about Reginald's death. Allison finds number 7 at the cabin and explains that Leonard Harold Peabody Jenkins is dangerous, but Victor refuses to leave, and Allison nearly rumors him, so he lashes out and accidentally slashes her throat. Harold takes Seven back to his house, and the brothers show up and rescue Allison. The next day, Victor finds the journal again, but not really again, and kills Harold after realizing that he was just using him. He heads to the academy and Luther greets him, but now knowing that he has powers, Luther traps him in the soundproof cage that Reginald kept him in as a child. The siblings argue about it, but no one lets Seven out, so the next morning, believing that they're going to be trapped in there forever, number 7 escapes the cage and becomes the White Violin. They destroy the academy room by room, and when Pogo speaks up and admits to knowing about Seven's powers, number 7 kills him. Grace goes down with the academy, and 5 realizes that the apocalypse is still happening and they need to stop number 7 from finishing their concert. At the concert, the brothers surround the White Violin, but he catches them in these energy beams that start to suck the life out of them. Allison manages to disrupt their powers by shooting past their ear, resulting in a beam of energy shooting out of Seven's chest straight at the moon, breaking it into pieces that start hurtling at the Earth. With no other choice, 5 gathers his siblings and time travels, scattering them through the 1960s. Klaus arrives first on February 11th, 1960. He and Ben appear in an alleyway and they wander off. After getting kicked out of a diner, Klaus gets taken in by a wealthy older woman and he ends up starting a cult. He travels to Mexico and India and California before abandoning his cult in November of 1963 to head back to Dallas. In June 1961, Allison appears in the same alley and immediately gets harassed and chased until she runs into a beauty parlor for safety. She's unable to speak for over a year, but works in the beauty parlor and meets Ray during one of his meetings for the civil rights movement. Luther arrives the following year in April of 1962. He travels to the academy but gets rejected by Reginald and returns to Dallas, where he starts working for Jack Ruby. The same year, scientist Grace meets and trains baby Pogo. He's sent on a space mission, but something goes wrong and he's saved using one of Reginald's serums. Diego lands in 1963, striking the super cool landing pose on September 1st. When he spots JFK speaking on the TV, he decides that he's going to prevent his assassination. On October 12, 1963, number 7 shows up in the alley, disoriented, and they stumble into the road where they get hit by Sissy's car. They don't have any memory of who they are, so they head back home with Sissy, where they work as a nanny for Harlan. Fast forward to November 25th, 5 arrives in the alley and finds a war going on in the streets, the result of the Soviets attacking the U.S. Before 5 can reunite with his family, Hazel shows up and warns him of the incoming nukes, and they travel 10 days earlier to give 5 time to stop the nuclear war. Rewind to November 15th, 1963, Hazel slips the Franco footage into 5's pocket just as the 3 Swedes show up and kill him. 5 escapes and returns to the alley, spotting Elliot in a window who helps him track down Diego in a psych ward. 5 can't trust that Diego won't do something stupid, so he leaves him in the psych ward, but Diego escapes with Lila. Later that same day, 5 finds Luther, who says he doesn't care about stopping this new apocalypse. And later that night, the police show up to arrest Allison's husband Ray for an altercation that he wasn't even in, and Allison almost uses her power for the first time since the night at the cabin over 2 years ago. The next day, Klaus meets Ray in prison. Elliot develops the Franco footage, and 5 and Diego spot Reginald on the grassy knoll. They head to the DS Umbrella Manufacturing Company to find Hargreaves. Diego follows him and gets stabbed when he hesitates during a fight, but Lila saves him. 7 goes out for a drive and gets attacked by the 3 Swedes, which triggers their powers, the sound waves leading 5 to find them the next morning. Allison reunites with Klaus, so he and Ben get Ray released from jail and he makes it to the sit-in, but the protest gets broken up, and as police officers are beating Ray, Allison uses her power to make them walk away. The handler arrives in 1963. Lila opens up to Diego about her parents getting murdered, and she hooks up with him and then falls asleep in his arms before going to meet her mother, the handler, who gives her the new mission of protecting number 5. The next morning, Luther reveals to Victor that he was the cause of the apocalypse, so he heads back to the farm. After overhearing that Seven might leave, Harlan runs off, and Seven rescues him from drowning, accidentally transferring some of their powers into him. Klaus relapses after an incident with Dave, and Allison runs into Luther, who shares the news of the new apocalypse. On November 19th, the siblings all gather at Elliot's for the first time, and Five apologizes for screwing up the time travel. Lila lures Five away, and he clocks her as being commissioned, so he calls out the handler, who offers Five a deal, a way out of 1963 for him and his family, in exchange for assassinating the commission's board of directors. The next day, November 20th, Allison tells Ray the truth about her powers, and Ben possesses Klaus for the first time. Later that evening, the siblings show up for dinner per Reginald's invitation. They get nowhere at dinner, but Five has a drink with Hargreaves, who suggests that his time jumps should start out smaller. Unsatisfied with this answer, Five accepts the deal with the handler and travels to 1982, where he assassinates the board of directors. The next morning, a blood-soaked Five hands over AJ to the handler in exchange for a briefcase back to 2019, with a surprise time limit of 90 minutes. The siblings don't all make it to the alley in time, so Five has to toss the briefcase and find a new way home. Lila drugs Diego to kidnap him to the commission. While trying to run away together, Seven and Sissy get stalked by the police. Seven uses their power but gets knocked out, and having exposed their power, they get taken into special custody and questioned by the FBI. The next day, November 22nd, the day of JFK's visit, Five and Luther head out to meet up with an older Five who is at the time on a mission to ensure that the plot goes through, which is probably why Five is so dismissive of Diego's attempts to stop the plot, because he knows he would never let that happen. At the commission, Diego finds the infinite switchboard and learns that Victor is the cause of doomsday again. Herb helps him return and warn the others. Seven is drugged and recedes into their mind, but resists recovering their repressed memories. When they're non-responsive to the FBI agent, the genius turns up the electric shock, which just causes energy to surge out of number 7. Allison, Diego, and Klaus all fail to make it through the energy waves, but Ben manages to possess Seven and talk to them, convincing them to accept what they've done and regain control. On the farm, Seven's energy surge is affecting Harlan. Carl tries to take him away, but Sissy stops him. While they're struggling for the gun, Carl accidentally shoots it at Harlan, but his powers deflect the bullet back at Carl. Luther and Five send old Five through the portal to 2019 with knowledge of how to stop the apocalypse. Hargreaves confronts 12 over their plot. He demands that they never contact him again, and when the leader threatens to expose him, it's revealed that Reginald is an alien, and it's implied that he kills them all. Back at Elliot's, Seven gets flashes of Harlan, and they all head to the farm where Harlan created an energy storm in the barn. Seven tries to take their powers back, and they think it works, but it actually doesn't. Lila confronts Five over killing her parents, but he tells her that the handler ordered the mission so that she could abduct her like she's trying to do to Harlan. Diego reasons with Lila and gets through to her, but the handler comes in shooting all of the umbrellas and then kills Lila. Five barely survives and manages to reverse time just enough to disarm the handler and let her be taken out by the last suite. With the handler dead for good this time, Herb and Dot give the umbrellas a briefcase to travel back to 2019, so the umbrellas leave 1963. The next day, November 23rd, Sissy and Harlan leave Dallas and take on the new names of Dana and Lester Pocket. They spend the next 26 years moving around as Harlan struggles to control his powers. Around 1969, Sissy starts getting sick, and on October 1st, 1989, in California, Sissy passes away. Harlan feels his connection with number 7 and tries to reach out, but he connects to the mothers who are experiencing the horror and the pain of the spontaneous pregnancy, so he tries to break the connection, but it melts the mother's brains. So this time around, only 16 women gave birth, but Reginald still managed to get 7 of them and train them to become the Sparrow Academy. After the events on the farm, Lila sulks around the commission until Herb and Dot give her passage to go whenever she wants to go, so she picks up the handler's stashed briefcase in Berlin in 1989, where she lives for about 3 months before she seeks out Diego. Okay, now I just have to point out that episode 7 shows Herb confronting Lila at the commission, and it says it's 1953, but in season 1, the commission is in 1955. Does it move around, or is that wrong? I'm making the timeline here, I gotta know. In 2010, Ray Chestnut dies at the age of 82. And in 2014, Pogo has a disagreement with Reginald and gets fired, leaving behind pills for the Sparrows to drug Reginald. Arriving on April 2nd, 2019, the Umbrellas find that the Academy is still standing, but it's become the Sparrow Academy, and there are 7 different adopted siblings in their place. The Umbrellas existing in a timeline where they were never born triggers a Kugelblitz to form in the basement, which will eventually wipe the universe out of existence. Harlan again senses number 7 in the timeline and packs for a trip to the Academy. The Umbrellas fight the Sparrows and have their asses handed to them, so they flee to the Hotel Obsidian. Victor meets up with Marcus seeking the briefcase, but when Marcus goes to the basement to get it, he finds Grace and the Blitz, which sends out a wave, erasing the hotel clerk's dog. And Marcus. Marcus is gone too. 5 warns his brothers to avoid their doppelgangers, but that's not going to be a problem. Allison finds out that Claire doesn't even exist in this timeline, and Lila drops off Stan to Diego, claiming that he's Stan's father. The next morning, Luther is abducted by the Sparrows, who think that the Umbrellas took Marcus. Klaus and 5 go on a road trip where 5 learns that all of their mothers died before they were born, creating a paradox. When 5 hears that Lila's at the hotel, he finds her with 2 briefcases, but neither of them work, so they realize they actually have to work together. The next day, Klaus learns that the Sparrows have been drugging Reginald and teaches him how to avoid taking his pills, and then finds the Kugelblitz in the basement. 5 and Lila jumpstart the briefcase to get back to the commission in 1955. They find that it's been frozen over, and 5 blames the grandfather paradox. They seek out the operations bunker and realize that 5 is the founder of the commission. The founder warns that the Kugelblitz can't be fixed and mutters the word oblivion. When 5 demands a solution, the founder just says, "Whatever you do, don't save the world." The Sparrows show up at the hotel to attack and kill the Umbrellas, but Harlan saves them with an energy blast that kills the Sparrows number 5 and 6. Later that night, to get out some of her rage, Diego takes Allison out to a bar to get in a fight, and Klaus babysits Stan until Stan accidentally shoots him. Victor learns that Harlan killed all of their mothers and keeps it a secret from the family. Klaus travels to the Gray Place and realizes that he's been dying his whole life, like when Hargreaves left him in the mausoleum, or when he literally fell off a building. Those weren't near-death experiences, those were death-death experiences. You fell off a building. Yeah, that's a death-death experience. The next morning, 5 and Lila return to the hotel. Since they return the following day, nothing is undone and they aren't any days older. Klaus reanimates, and when talking to his siblings at the bar, he brings up the Kugelblitz again, and now that they know where it is, the Umbrellas decide that they need to hand over Harlan to the Sparrows so they can call a truce and work together to stop the Blitz. 7 won't let this happen, and at this point, Allison still has their back, so Allison sneaks away with Harlan. Victor meets up with them the next morning, and while Harlan is trying to transfer the powers back to Victor, Allison steps into the energy dome and orders Harlan to stop, which actually levels up her own powers. Lila and Diego discover the passage and wander into the Hotel Oblivion. They get attacked by a guardian and escape back to the Obsidian. Klaus explains to Reginald what happened in the Gray Place, and a clear-minded Hargreaves starts training Klaus by killing him over and over again. 5 tracks down Pogo and learns about Oblivion. Harlan successfully transfers his powers back to Victor, but while Victor's gone, Harlan reveals to Allison that he's the reason their mothers are dead, and that Victor knew, so she kills him and turns his body over to the Sparrows. The next morning, the Sparrows call a meeting of both families. The siblings work together to try and contain the Kugelblitz into Christopher, but it only works temporarily, and when Chris explodes, Fate dies in the blast, and the Blitz grows so big it starts consuming the Academy. They take refuge in the Hotel Obsidian. Luther proposes to Sloane, and Lila reveals to Diego that she's pregnant. Big night. Big night. The next day, the siblings gather, and 5 declares that they've lost, and it's time to embrace the apocalypse. Luther and Sloane announce their engagement and wedding, Klaus and Hargreaves return, and the siblings spend the night celebrating after the wedding. The following morning, Reginald calls a meeting and shares his plan for them to fight the Guardian and save the world. 7 and 5 insist that they should vote, and 5 is the final vote to stay at the hotel, breaking the 4-4 tie. Reginald makes a dramatic apology and says he's going to the courtyard, but he actually goes to the White Buffalo room and later kills Luther to lure everyone and push them through the passage to get his way anyway. And then after all Klaus is done, Reginald stops him from coming into the passage with them, so Klaus throws himself onto the buffalo horn to die. The siblings search the Hotel Oblivion for the sigil, and Reginald rings the bell summoning the Guardians. They kill 3 of the 4 Guardians and make it back to the lobby. 5 spots the sigil on the floor, and Reginald orders all the siblings except Allison to stand on the stars, and the hotel reveals a machine that uses the siblings as the power source, draining them of their life. Hargreaves is unaffected by Allison's power, demanding that he stop, so she smashes him in his alien head and then finishes the process anyway. Next thing we know, Allison is returning home to Claire and Ray, and the rest of the Umbrellas come up in an elevator and find a monument for the Obsidian Memorial Park donated by Reginald Hargreaves on October 1st, 1989. Luther has his regular body back, Diego has his fingers, and Five has his arm, but Sloane is missing and so are their powers. The siblings go their separate ways as the city is revealed to be dominated by the Hargreaves, showing Reginald and Abigail looking out the window of their tower. And that's where we're at by the end of season 3. I don't have any theories for the last season. I watched the trailer, but I haven't put any thought into it. I'm just really excited to see what happens.